Christians. Yes, I've heard of them. The Empress speaks rightly, see that the people hate these Christians. They are the enemies of Rome and of the state.
The people want vengeance, Nero. Let them have it. The people suspect you. Let their suspicion turn in this more beneficial direction.
Surely, my lord, they have paid Caesar. They must pay. Do you hear? The Christians are plotting to destroy me. You have often reminded us, Nero, of the judgment of history. What will its verdict be if you punish the innocent and betray your own friends? Let future ages looking back at this time regard Nero with wonder and amazement. Let history say, Nero, the ruler of the world, Nero, a god, burned Rome because he was as powerful as Jupiter. He loved poetry so much that he sacrificed Rome for a song. History need not say that the burning of Rome was good, but it must say that it was colossal, unhuman. I cannot listen to any veiled suggestion that my emperor is a coward. That is amusing. You who were too cowardly to risk your life in yourself. Petronius is right. You refuse to die for me. He wants to preserve you, and I want to kill him. Why do you defend these people?
I'll tell you why, my lord. Because his nephew Patricius loved the Christian religion. And it made Petronius is himself a Christian.
Petronius? You a Christian? I am not. I have heard that the Christians teach you to love your neighbor. And as I see what men are, I cannot for the life of me love my fellow men. Ha! He does not love you, Tim. The tablet bearer, the people shall have their vengeance. I hereby proclaim that the guilt of the burning of our beloved city rests with the foul sect which calls itself Christian. They have spread the lie that it was Nero who burned Rome. I will exterminate these criminals in a manner matching the enormity of their crime. Their punishment will be a war. The spectacle of terror. To all evil men, everywhere and forever, who would harm you, or harm Rome, or harm your emperor, who loves you. Pause, Nero, before you sign this decree. Rome has given the world justice and order. Sign that, and Roman justice will receive a blow from which it may never recover. Condemn these Christians, and you make martyrs of them, and ensure their immortality. Condemn them, and in the eyes of history, you condemn yourself.
When I have finished with these Christians, Petronius, history will not show that they ever existed.
Wow. I love this portrayal. It's a very good movie about the early times of Rome. If you have never seen it, I would encourage you to see it. There's a beautiful passage or a section in here where Peter gives a sermon to the early Christians in Rome. And it's marvelous. It gives you a sense of what it might have been like in the early days. But the point is this. You notice the person that turned the tide of Nero? You know, Nero is looking for a scapegoat for his burning of Rome. I mean, it's like Titulinus, it's Petronius, it's this. And his wife, the Empress Pompeia, comes up with the idea, let's blame the Christians. And that sets off his infamous persecution of Rome. Well, who is this person? Her name is Pompeia Sabina. She's the second wife of Nero. Here's a statue of her. According to Josephus, she was a Jewess who tried to persuade Nero not to persecute Jews. According to Tacitus, the Roman historian, he did not favor her as much. He described her as a vain woman who was an opportunist who basically slept her way to the top. Now, why do I point this out? I think this is just an opinion. This is just an idea. I think that much like the other personages that we have seen, these symbols in the book of Revelation, I think the Whore of Babylon could be reflected off of Pompeia Sabina, the second wife of Nero, because of her Jewish connection. She may have made a play, instead of persecuting Jews, persecute the Christians, to take the heat off of the Jews. So in other words, she played in her role as empress to divert the attention from Jews to Christians. Okay? That's this kind of harlotry, this betrayal of the covenant relationship, because if you can't just say, we'll only do this group of people, because eventually it'll seep into others that you don't like in the state. So you basically cut your own throat when you do something like this. So I just put that out there as a suggestion that Pompeia Sabina of Rome, second wife of Nero, is a reflection in a personage form of the Whore of Babylon. Because this is someone who betrays her own culture in order to rise to the top, literally sleeping her way to the top, thinking that the higher you go, the more secure you are. And what happens to her, interestingly enough, in history, is that Nero turns on her and actually kills her. In the movie Quo Vadis, it shows that when he is in one of his fits of rage, he chokes her to death for having suggested this idea of persecuting the Christians, because it backfires on them at the end. If I'm not mistaken, in reality what happens is I believe he stabbed her to death in one of his mad fits of rage. Okay? So she comes to a brutal end one way or the other. But I think it's an interesting kind of connection. I wonder if the first century Christians, in thinking of Nero as the first beast, would have also thought of Pompeia as the original whore of Babylon. Just to throw that out there. Okay? I'm not saying it for sure. Probably isn't. And especially after all that I ranted and raved about, you can't put these to actual personages. I wonder if there wasn't something of an immediate connection there. So just take that with a grain of salt, and we'll move on from that.
What's the movie?
The movie is called Quo Vadis, which is Latin for where are you going?
How do you spell it?
Quo Vadis.
Q-U-O-V-A-I-S, 2 words.
Quo Vadis. It comes from the Latin phrase, Quo Vadis Domini, where are you going, Lord? Because in this movie, Peter leaves Rome, and on his way out of Rome, he's stopped by a vision of our Lord. And this is part of church tradition, actually. Peter left Rome during the beginnings of the persecutions under Nero. And he was leaving Rome, and there's a place outside of Rome that's called Quo Vadis Domini, which is the traditional spot where Peter supposedly had this vision, where he saw Jesus carrying the cross into Rome. And he asked this vision of our Lord, he goes, Quo Vadis Domini, where are you going, Lord? And he tells Peter, I go to Rome to be crucified again. And so Peter gets the clue, turns around, goes back into Rome. He is arrested and then crucified in Rome. Upside down. So this movie, it's called Quo Vadis, is because the person that plays Peter enacts this particular scene where he's leaving Rome and he stopped. You don't see the vision, it's all like acted out. And then he turns around, says, I gotta go back to Rome, and then shows that he's crucified. So that's where it comes from.
There's also a book.
Yeah, there's a book that's based on this movie as well. Yeah. But it's based off of church tradition that says this is why Peter went back into Rome when he could have escaped the persecutions that were begun under Nero. It's because he saw a vision of our Lord that says, that I'm going to be crucified again. So he followed his Lord to the point of being crucified again. Okay? So that's where it comes from. All right. So that is the identity of the harlot. What can we summarize from all of this? I think the primary image of the harlot of Babylon is that it's unfaithful Israel. Unfaithful Israel. That's the primary meaning. Specifically, Jerusalem of the time of the first century. Okay? Because that was the generation, that was the group that rejected and crucified our Lord. So they betrayed the covenant. They betrayed all of what the prophets were foretelling for what? Do you remember what the Jewish leaders said when asked by Pilate? You know, what shall I do with your king? What did they say? We have no king but Caesar. That's their statement, and I love the way that Scott Hahn says it. That's their statement of anti-faith. They're not trusting in God. Whom are they trusting? Caesar. They're saying, we pledge our allegiance to Caesar, not to God. A tremendous indictment and a tremendous statement of anti-faith. That's being a harlot to the beast. You hear what I'm saying? That's playing the whore to the political powers here on earth and not pledging your allegiance to the God of history. Following me? I always listen intently at that point in Good Friday when we read that gospel and there's that statement where they say, we have no king but Caesar. That's such a powerful statement of this anti-faith. They've given up. Their true allegiance is not with God, it's with the political rulers. It's, if you will, lying in bed with the world, with the political powers of the world. It's being a whore to Babylon. Okay?
What is the timed writing of the Revelation?
It is my opinion, based on, and there's a bit of discussion about that. There are some very good theologians that believe that the writing of the book of Revelation occurred in the late 60s, at the time of Nero. There are equally good and more traditional reading of the book of Revelation, or understanding of when it was written, I should say, is that it was in the late 90s, under the reign of Domitian. It is my opinion that the weight of evidence is more on the traditional understanding that it was done in the 90s rather than the 60s.
And Jesus had been crucified how many years before?
60 years. Because he died in 30 AD.
Okay.
Now there's several reasons and justifications I could give for that. I would recommend going onto the website, stcharlesbiblestudy.com, and look at the very first few presentations that I gave, where I go over the introduction to the book of Revelation, where I give my reasons why I believe it was. Of course, that's why I'm pointing it out. You can go back and view them on your own to see if you want to go into a greater depth.
I did read the beginning.
Yes, good.
John was one of the apostles?
Yes. It is my understanding and my conviction that it was John the Apostle who wrote the book of Revelation. Again, there are contradictory views, but I think that when you look at all of the evidence, it strongly leans more towards John's writing it than other explanations. Okay.
So, Salome was living at the time too, because she wanted...
The head of John the Baptist? At the time of Christ, yes. I don't know if she was still alive at the time of the book of Revelation.
She wouldn't have been before.
And if she was, I wouldn't suggest that she would be as influential as Pompeia would be in terms of being the personage of the whore of Babylon, if that's where you're going with that idea.
No, I'm with you.
Okay. Because she would have only been known to a local group in Palestine, whereas Pompeia was the empress of Rome.
To me, the symbolism of the cities seems more real than an actual person, although I love Pompeia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love the way that they portrayed her in this movie, too.
Is that Agnes Moorehead?
No, it wasn't. I don't know the name of the actress. But that was not Agnes Moorehead. They also toned down her character. If you read kind of the backstory of this movie, they had her far more, shall we say, suggestive and sexually aggressive. But because of the time in which this movie was made, which I believe was the 50s?
51.
51. It was considered too racy to portray her in that manner, so they toned her down tremendously. But I thought it was interesting that initially she was much